Hello, it's Sunday, January 14th, 2024. We'll be reading along today. Leftist Read-Along again. Uh, it's my weekly live stream of me just reading along some leftist articles. This is for knowledge purposes and for growth, uh, so that there's somewhere to read along these articles. Mainly, I do this just for myself to make sure that I'm reading all these articles. I do read other articles, but this one's the one I've chosen to definitely commit to on a weekly basis on Sunday evenings. And people are welcome to read along if they like, comment, maybe have a short chat afterwards. I'm going to get going right away today. There's 3 articles to make sure we can get them all done within the hour and maybe have a few comments. Let's see here. All right. I'll mention again, today I'll be reading PSL articles from liberationnews.org, starting with this article here, posted on January 10th, 2024, about 4 days ago. 2023, the deadliest year for West Bank Palestinians. All right, this one was written by Samina Rahman. It's about a 4-minute read. I'll get going here. There's a few images. The image is captioned IDF raid in Jenin camp, January 2023. Photo by Wikipedia. And let's get going. You make sure that the audio is good. Everything seems to be working. All right. So here we go. The second Nakba is continuing at an accelerated pace in the West Bank, with unprecedented levels of violence being carried out by both IDF and Israeli settlers. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights warned that Israel is imposing a state of constant terror in the West Bank due to Israeli state force and settler violence. UNRWA, a UN agency providing services to Palestinian refugees, declared 2023 to be the deadliest year for Palestinians in the West Bank since it began recording casualties in 2005. Nearly 300 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since October 7th. It is also the worst year for killing of children. Peace Now, an Israeli advocacy group, reported an unmatched surge in settlement activity in the West Bank, which settlers carry out often with IDF support. A large number of the settler outposts violate private Palestinian land. To date, 9 new outposts have been created and 18 illegal roads paved, as well as a new phenomenon of settlers closing Palestinian traffic routes against military orders. 300 settler attacks since October 7th. Over 300 Israeli settler attacks have been recorded since October 7th, where they threaten Palestinians at gunpoint, vandalize their property, hamper water access, ruin their olive trees, steal their belongings. In addition to physically attacking them, settler violence has driven over 1,200 Palestinians out of their homes. While Israel did not approve these outposts officially, according to the OHCHR report released last week, settlers are expanding settlements with the political backing of key ministers in Israel's most right-wing government to date. On December 24th, Israel's cabinet approved NIS 75 million, in parentheses, 20 million in US dollars, to fortify 70 outposts in the West Bank despite being recognized as illegal. This blatantly violates the 2016 UN Security Council Resolution 2334 that found Israel's settlements, even back then, to be a flagrant violation of international law, and demanded that the expansion to be stopped per the Geneva Conventions. it is clear that the Israel government and many of its citizens do not care for or uphold any treaties or agreements as they continue to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from their land. Drones target and kill youth. Additionally, the IDF has been carrying out constant incursions, harassments, and attacks on various West Bank cities, towns, and refugees camps to preemptively target what it calls terror cells. During its attack on the Valada refugee camp, the IDF recently fired directly at ambulances to prevent them from reaching injured civilians. In the southern West Bank, the IDF tear gassed youth resisting illegal raids. The IDF routinely targets youth and recently killed 16-year-old Youssef Nadir Suleiman Idris, who happened to be sitting near the area where confrontations were taking place. Israel also carries out drone attacks on innocent Palestinians. On January 7th, drone attacks killed 7 Palestinians, including 4 brothers on their way to work in Jenin. Israel also assaults Palestinians at checkpoints, where suffocating and discriminatory movement restrictions are imposed. This also applies to the right of worship for West Bank Palestinians who are increasingly denied access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in East Jerusalem, especially for Friday prayers, where 50,000 usually participate. Israeli police recently attacked worshippers there with wastewater. Child casualties doubled and 880 arrested. While facing humiliating military and operational defeats in Gaza, the IDF carries out operations against the most vulnerable in the West Bank. UNICEF reports a doubling of casualties of children since 2022, with 83 children killed and 576 injured and detained. UN High Commissioner of Human Rights Volker Turk stated that the violations documented in the OHCHR report repeat the pattern and nature of violations reported in the past in the context of long-standing Israeli occupation. The intensity of violence and repression is something that has not been seen in years. IDF's horrific attacks are supplemented by its mass arbitrary arrest of Palestinians with bogus charges. Many are then held under administrative detention without being charged. The IDF preemptively arrests nearly 60 Palestinians daily, with over 5,730 currently detained. Since the beginning of 2024, nearly 230 Palestinians have been arrested in the West Bank. OHCHR describes the arrest as regularly involving physical and psychological abuse and humiliation by the IDF, including sexual and gender-based violence against men and women, such that the process of arrest itself amounts to torture. As of November 20, the IDF had also arrested nearly 880 Palestinian children, a brutal practice made possible through Israelis' persistent dehumanization of Palestinians as animals. The conditions are so dire that recently released Luai al-Tawil of Hebron described Israel's Negev prison as an exact copy of the Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo prisons, both notorious symbols of U.S. human rights violations. The people fight back. Despite the constant terror and all-consuming attacks by the IDF and settlers, Palestinians in the West Bank called for a general strike last week to protest Israel's assassination of Hamas and Al-Qassam brigade's leader, Saleh al-Aruri, led by a coalition of Palestinian factions. Shops, universities, and public and private offices participated in this strike. Ismat Shakshir, a member of the General Secretariat of the General Union of Palestinian Women, described the assassination as desperate measures due to the inability of the occupation to make headway in Gaza. Resistance fighters in Nablus, Jenin, Ariha, and other areas continue to repel Israeli violence despite being unmatched in military equipment. Hamas senior political officer Hussam Badran said that the resistance in Jenin and throughout the West Bank will break the arrogance of the Israeli occupation. a U.S.-Israeli aggression. While the evidence of blatant and illegal aggression and the casualties reach unprecedented levels, the U.S. continues to empower the Israeli government to carry out its genocidal agenda while offering half-hearted condemnations as weak lip service to save face. In the UN, the United States blocked calls for a ceasefire, even after the rarely used Article 99 of the UN Charter was invoked to warn of an impending human catastrophe in Gaza. Just last month, the Biden administration introduced a national security bill, which includes an additional $10.1 billion in unconditional military aid to Israel, and has twice bypassed Congress to immediately ship arms and ammunition to Israel. This is not just an Israeli war, it is a U.S.-Israeli war. Washington is also a perpetrator of genocide, fully responsible for every single injury and death made possible by U.S. weapons and political support. All right. Again, you can find this article on liberationnews.org. And the article title is 2023, the deadliest year for West Bank Palestinians, published on January 10th, 2024. Cool. I'm going to take a moment, and I'll be right back to set up for the next article. I probably didn't need to disappear to switch articles. Doesn't really take that long. Just going to take a second to grab some water. Excuse if I do butcher some of the names. I am not prolific or great. I'm not the greatest reader in the world, but that's why I'm reading, to get really good at it and understand the subjects and the issues and make sense of everything. All right, I'll be right back. All right, the next article on Liberation News. South Africa takes Israel to court for genocide in Gaza. This is written by the Liberation staff, published January 11th, 2024. It's about a 1-minute read, so this shouldn't take too long. Let's see, the photo is of the South Africa legal team after presenting at the ICJ. Credit on X at Sophie_Mokoena. Here's a picture right here. All right, let's move on to the read. Today marked the first day of a historic international hearing by the International Court of Justice in a lawsuit charging Israel with genocide against Palestinians. The case was brought by South Africa, whose own history of struggle against apartheid has made the country strongly supportive of Palestine and is backed by many governments and organizations around the world. The ICJ was set up at the end of World War II as a body where countries can sue each other for violations of international law. Under international law, countries have an obligation to prevent genocide, like the one being committed by the Israeli war machine in Gaza. A panel of 17 judges from around the world will hear the case presented by lawyers from South Africa and elsewhere, and Israel will have a lawyer present as well. The lawsuit is shining a spotlight on the crimes of the Israeli regime and is highly embarrassing for its main sponsor, the U.S. government. The ICJ does not, however, have the power to order the arrest of the war criminals responsible for the genocide. Like when an individual brings a lawsuit against another individual, the most a court can do is order financial penalties and remedial action. The ICJ could rule that Israel must end its assault, but it has no ability to enforce its decision. The case brought by South Africa is an important act of solidarity, but it remains up to the people's movement of the world to bring to bear the pressure that can stop the US-Israeli onslaught and bring Netanyahu, Biden, and all the other mass murderers to justice. All right. So that's an update on what happened this late this week, taking Israel and mainly Israel to court, and hopefully something will be done about it. Even though it is kind of just it's not bound by law. Like nobody can obligate Israel or the U.S. to stop bombing Gaza. But let's hope we have some world solidarity and put enough pressure for it to stop. In the meantime, I'm going to move on to the next article. All right, this is another Liberation news article. As you can see by the heading on the website, this is a newspaper of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. This article reads, headline, 100,000 expected to take pro-Palestine demands to Biden's doorstep. Let's see. Natalie Marquez published this on January 12, 2024. The photo is of 500,000 people participated in the largest pro-Palestinian march in U.S. history on November 4th, credited by Bretton Young, as you can see here. And let's see. Reposted from People's Dispatch. A coalition of Palestine organizations are taking over the overwhelmingly popular demand for a ceasefire straight to Biden's doorstep on January 13th at 1 p.m. at the Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C. The March for Gaza is being organized by the American Muslim Task Force on Palestine, which includes American Muslims for Palestine, Council on American Islamic Relations, Islamic Circle of North America, Muslim American Society, Muslim Student Association National, Muslim Legal Fund of America, Muslim Ummah of North America, and Young Muslims, alongside the Answer Coalition, which played a key role in organizing the largest pro-Palestinian demonstration in U.S. history on November 4th. The demands of the march are a permanent ceasefire, an end to unconditional U.S. funding of Israel's genocide, and Israeli accountability for crimes against Palestinians and violations of international law. Edward Ahmed Mitchell, Deputy Director of CAIR, told People's Dispatch, "We have a moral obligation to make sure that if the president is not going to listen to the cries of children being pulled through the rubble and mothers wailing over the slaughtered families, then he's at least going to hear from the American people marching to the White House." He continued, "We remember the legacy of Dr. King, who risked his reputation to stand up against the Vietnam War near the end of his life." Since the upsurge of the Palestine Solidarity Movement following October 7, hundreds of thousands of people have been organizing and mobilizing to demand the liberation of Palestine. Across New York City, organizers have demonstrated outside of the offices and homes of pro-Israel politicians such as Richie Torres, Chuck Schumer, and Gregory Meeks, denouncing those figures for their unwavering support for the Zionist state and calling on them to support a ceasefire resolutions in U.S. Congress. A coalition of organizations blocked 3 bridges and 4 tunnels in a highly disruptive direct action on Monday, a feat that had not been accomplished in New York City since 1995. Later that day, a handful of protesters disrupted a Biden campaign event, interrupting his speech with calls of ceasefire now. Biden was then subsequently met with protesters immediately after flying into a Dallas airport. 13 protesters were arrested for blocking the entrance to the Dallas Love Field Airport. Here's a picture of a tweet from Breakthrough News on X, formerly known as Twitter. Now more than a dozen protesters were arrested after taking the streets outside Love Field Airport, where President Biden is expected to land. And there's a video there. I'm not going to play the video. Feel free to follow this link to watch the video yourself. I'll continue with the report. On Wednesday, December 10th, San Francisco became the largest U.S. city to call for a ceasefire after the Board of Supervisors voted 8-3 in favor of a ceasefire resolution. A crowd of 100,000 is expected on Saturday as public support for Palestine grows among the people of the U.S., especially young people. A Harvard-Capps-Harris poll conducted from December 13 to 14 affirmed young people's overwhelming support. In this poll, 2,034 registered voters in the U.S. were asked what they believed was the long-term answer to the Israel-Palestinian dispute: for Arab states to absorb the Palestinians, for there to be two states, Israel and Palestine, or for Israel to be ended and given to Hamas and the Palestinians. 51% of people between the ages of 18 and 24 chose for Israel to be ended and given to Hamas and the Palestinians. This represents a massive change from the same poll in November, in which only 17% of young people indicated they would prefer for Israel to be ended. The provocative poll also asked respondents whether they supported Israel or Hamas. According to the results, 50% of people aged 18 to 24 support Hamas over Israel. This is a notable shift from the same question posed in November, in which 45% of young people chose Hamas over Israel. A New York Times Siena College poll from December also found that young voters in the U.S. are far more critical of Israel and the Biden administration's support of the Zionist state than older voters. Nearly 3/4 of voters from 18 to 29 disapprove of the way Biden is handling the war in Gaza. Compared to older voters, this group of young voters largely denounced Israeli action, with nearly 3/4 saying that Israel is not taking enough precautions to avoid civilian casualties, and almost half saying that it is intentionally killing civilians. A majority of 55% of young people oppose additional U.S. aid to Israel. End of article. All right, so these articles are pretty short this week. But this is a summary update of what's happening, mainly overseas in Israel, Palestine. My personal short summary opinions on these is that, yeah, it doesn't make sense what's happening. First of all, we shouldn't be bombing women and children. We shouldn't call it a war when it's really an occupation, when you have one army, the Israel army, fully backed by the U.S. Army, by U.S. funding, but with billions of dollars, with the Iron Dome. And then you have Hamas, which is really just an organization that is reacting to the occupation. Obviously, there's more details to Hamas, but they obviously don't have the backing of the strongest military force in the world. You know, they actually don't have much funding at all. So, in regards to a two-state solution, it's hard to answer now with seeing how far they've come. I personally am under the camp that why does Israel deserve, or why do the Jews deserve their own state when there's over 3,000 religions out there? Do they all deserve their own state? Where are we going to put all these 3,000 states, right? So no, they've been occupying Palestinian land for decades now, and what this is just the boiling point of what's happening there now. People are now seeing it with the age of the internet, especially young people, Zoomers, millennials. We see the truth now. Even myself, I was not as aware of what was going on, say 10 years ago, as I am now. but it's just logical to me that we do not need to be displacing all these people just to give a religion its own state practically, if you want, you should watch very in-depth documentaries that explain them. I would recommend something like Avi Martin's Empire Files, Gaza Fights for Freedom. I think that's a really great one, and it summarizes the whole history of what's happening here. There's additional videos that you can also watch, but I think people do need to get more involved in learning about the history, that this did not just start on October 7th of 2023. This has been a long time coming. I obviously do not support violence on either side, but what I am saying is what many other people are saying is that the violence that Hamas has brought upon on Israel on October 7th was definitely provoked violence. It was definitely what Martin Luther King Jr. would call violence is the language of the unheard, right? It's the language of the oppressed. It's the language of the poor. When you do not give them alternatives, peaceful means of alternatives, or when all peaceful means of alternatives are run out, such as when Palestinians were protesting and Israel soldiers were sniping down reporters, sniping down children, sniping down nurses, right? Sniping them from over 300 yards, 100 yards away while they were throwing rocks. So no, there is no equivalence. This is oppressive and it should stop. Well, that's pretty much my point of view on it. Cool. And there's not much else to say about it for me for today. I will continue to try live streaming these and posting ahead of time, scheduling time so that maybe more people can join. And I will also save these for myself as personal dialogue, kind of as a journal. And hopefully I will get more people to chime in with their questions or their concerns or their ideas. Everyone have a great weekend, and please keep supporting the freedom of Palestinians. Please keep supporting the humanitarian aid so that we can stop these atrocities. It's only when there's mass support and pressure from the working class people that we can stop these kinds of things. When the government sees that it has lost the message, that it has lost the higher ground, when enough people as a movement apply enough pressure, we can make a difference. If not to fix the world entirely, we can fix at least one thing. We can save at least a few thousand people or a few colonies or tribes or whatever. But never give up hope. Always strive to make the world a better place. Everybody have an excellent weekend, and goodbye.